Welcome, Patrice. It's so glad to have you on. Thank you so much for coming. How are you?
I am great. It is so good to see you, at least coast to coast. Yes.
I know. Patrice and I have been working together for just about six months now. And she is amazing, as you guys will see in this podcast. So it was really important for me to have her on to really kind of show you guys, tell you about her story and what she's been through, and because it's very unique. And then to also share with you some of her abilities, which I have experienced firsthand, and they are profound. When I say nothing short of a miracle, that is literally who Patrice is. So, all right, so let's jump into it. So tell me about your accident. Tell us about your accident and how did you come into your gifts?
I came into my gifts about 12 years ago. I was always interested in the metaphysical, but it was in the background. And then I was in this car accident and I lost the curve in my spine and I had a left to right brain concussion. So my pineal gland was just rattled big time. And I just all of a sudden started getting these new awarenesses. I used to call them, learn a new trick or trade every 7 to 10 days. And it was, so that happened in January. In March, I'm originally from Houston, Texas. So that's where the accident was. And then in March, end of March was in Santa Monica, and a guy came up to me and told me my life was getting ready to change. And being from the South and from Texas, I just looked at him and went, yeah, sure. And he was right. The next month, unexpectedly, I got invited to go to China and Tibet. And in Tibet, the monks gave me holy water. And once I drank it, I was just, again, another level of transformation happened. And I just came back to Texas with learning, with lots and lots of questions and studying and learning a whole new vocabulary. And these skills just kept coming and coming and coming. So
that must have been quite, jarring to you though, because your whole life you've lived thinking one way, the things are this way, and then all of a sudden at a later age you're opened up to all of this stuff. That must have been quite jarring. Also beautiful, but
it was. I came back, I didn't know where to go. So I went to a psychic of an event, and the lady just talked to me and said, oh, you got a bunch of spirits around you. Your spirit guide is Cyril, go Google him. And I'm like, I go Google my spirit guide, And but my spirit guide was Saint Cyril of Jerusalem. And I was like, okay, and immediately was able to communicate with him. And then and all these angels were around me. And I came back from Tibet. I was all of a sudden having these visions in Tibet, and I was drawing them, and I was asking people what they were. And this lady goes, that's a Kundalini drawing. Go Google it. And I Googled it, and what was good and on Google and what I drew were exactly the same thing. So, I left the psychic fair with this. I have a math and science background and a master's in educational psychology, but it was this, to be able to go Google it and then get the information and tie it all together. And it was a roller coaster ride. I just quit my job and devoted my life to it.
So what happened to the relationships around you? How did everybody else take it?
It was, I've always been curious, and I've always been a researcher and studying. So they just kind of tolerated it. But eventually it shifted things, and more and more into this new world that I'm in. So meeting people like you. Now, I never would have met you otherwise.
Sure, everything happens for a reason.
If I didn't have these abilities, I never would have met you. So
sweet. What happened immediately afterwards that kind of alerted you to the fact that spirit could actually speak through you, because you're a channel and you speak light language, and it's very beautiful.
Thank you. It started out slow. We all have those two voices in our head, that more that ego voice, the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, that plays rampant, at least in my head back then, and still does at times, but that more quiet, gentler voice. And I just started paying attention to it when I got back. And it would be just simple things. I'd be like, if I was in a conversation with you, they'd say, scratch your head or fold your arms or take your bracelet off, something that I could do, pick up my cup, put it back down, things that I could do that other people around me wouldn't know. But I was learning to listen to that voice, and I just started paying attention to it more and more. And it's later, and now looking back, and plus being the educator background, it's kind of like red light, green light game that we played when we were little, the Simon Says game that we played. It's like, the teacher's going, can you hear me? And will you listen to what I'm doing? And can you follow instructions? And it was just that simple. It just literally, and I just started doing it more and more and more. And to the point, and then I'd been introduced to Cyril, my spirit guide, and I was introduced to that writing it's
freeform writing. Yep.
Well, it's not really freeform, but a type of freeform writing. And
unconscious writing.
Unconscious writing. Freeform writing is a little bit different, but and so I started writing. They were just like free conscious writing, and I just write it, and they said just do it, and I did, and then immediately spirit just started writing back to me. So it was like I was having this written two-way conversation between me and spirit just started teaching me. They'd tell me what to do or what to read, and they had me traveling a lot. I went and traveled a lot, and so I did that for a couple of years. And then in 2012, by then I had a knowing. I just had this knowing. I wanted to be able to see. One time I went to a class on visualization, and when I got to class, spirit goes, that's not what you're supposed to learn. And I'm like, could you have told me before I got here on the front row in front of the camera? But they were like, you'll get distracted with colors. We just want you to have that internal knowing. And so it's like, best I can describe it to people is, if I ask you what 2 + 2 is, it's 4. We've learned that, but it's just that knowing. Most of the time when we carry on a conversation, it's just a knowing. And they said, we just want you to get to that knowing. And by fall of 2012, I had that ability with spirit, and they started teaching me another language. I practiced 3 or 4 hours a day for 4 or 5 months, because it was a lot of muscle changes in my face and my throat. So it was just sounds and muscle.
The sounds are quite hard to form if you're not in the trance state. It's like you can't quite get them out correctly.
Right. And so I just practiced. So it was just literally single sounds, and then blends, and eventually words, and then fluency, and then eventually I can translate it. And now I can do healings like I did for you or for other people, or just I can do all sorts of things. I get prophecies, healings, blessings. It's just I'm from the South, and I'm very Christian oriented, but everything that it says in the Bible that the spirit can give you, I can now do. I don't so it's been an interesting ride, and it's all through spirit. I'm just a channeler, just a conduit, and learning to trust that inner knowing, that intuition is the biggest thing.
I would 100% agree. And speaking of you working on me, the first time we met, we were introduced through a friend of mine that I met at ceremony, and turns out he had gone to school with Patrice, and she pulled a sword out of his back that was like bothering him for years, and was like kind of debilitating to him. And he said, I never had pain again, which struck with me because we were talking about this at ceremony, and I thought, I have to meet this woman, because I have been able to do that, but only on a small scale, like little darts, not swords. Like if I saw a sword, I'd be like, I don't know what to do with that. now, I mean, I guess since I've met you, I've kind of picked it up. But so let's talk a little bit about kind of what happened to me. And my listeners know I'm an open book, so I don't mind sharing my experience because it was quite profound. But I've had back pain since I was in high school. I fell in a cheerleading injury, and Patrice and I got on the phone, and it took a while for him to introduce us. I don't know why. We were both kind of like, let's go with this. But we finally got introduced, and we jumped on the phone immediately. And I said, would you just have a look at my back? And she said, yeah, I can try. And she said, yeah, there's something there. And as she was saying that, I was seeing Arcturian light coming through. I was getting visions of Arcturians. And then I started profoundly crying. And then I had to walk back through the experience. This was a bit traumatic, but I mean, I've since worked through it, and I realized it was all for my highest and greatest good, and it happened for a reason. And I was doing some things at that time that were not in alignment with who I am now, that opened me up to things like that. But basically, I got held down by a reptilian being who essentially tried to, put something inside of me and missed. And I don't know if they were going to rape me. I wasn't sure. I was flat on my stomach. They erased this memory from me completely. I didn't have it until Patrice. And then they put something in my back, and it like went way up inside of me. And I could feel her as she was speaking light language and doing, she said, I'm going to blow holy air into there, and I'm going to do this and that. I could feel it all like kind of dissipating. And it was really weird. Afterwards, I said, okay, I'm like, this feels like too good to be true. I feel like it's going to come back. And you just said, no, that's the muscle memory. That's the cellular memory that it's there. It's not there anymore. So just cut the cord when it comes up. And I do that, and poof, then it goes away again. And and that was literally, I called my mom and was like, this is amazing. I have never been able to fix my back. And I've done surgeries, I've done everything, under the sun. So that was my amazing story with Patrice. And how did you know that you had this gift to kind of see swords and to see implants and see things like that? How did that befall you?
It's interesting. Again, it's just that trust. Everyone has the intuitive ability, and it's just trusting your intuition and trusting this knowing. And it's our friend that we're talking about. He had driven me home from an event, and we hugged each other goodbye, and he walked away, and I was like, I'm see the sword. I don't normally see swords, but I did. And of course he said, I said, do you want to remove it? I have to have permission from everyone before I can do anything. You have to ask me. And then I need that, and then I'll ask again for permission. I also ask permission from your higher self, from your spirit guides, from the source of all things. It's a complicated thing, so I can't go in and do anything that you don't, even if you say
Sometimes they say no. Sometimes they say no because it's a lesson that you chose to learn.
And then even sometimes I've worked with someone recently, and they said yes, gave me all the permission, and I only could go so far. And I said, I can't go any further. And they said, why? I said, because you're internally you're blocking me. And they would, but I gave you all the permission. I said, well, you're blocking me. I don't have permission to go any further. And then we worked on that block because she wanted to go further. So everyone's in total control. I can't do anything that isn't for your highest good. And I just, like with you called and asked, and I said, I don't know, I'll try. That's it. I'm just willing to try and be that vessel for the information. And if I see it, whether it's a sword or I've taken out knives out of the shoulders, or just if someone has
cancer,
are just events that are coming up that you want to prepare for, or or just a scenario, I just go into my language and spirit just tells me. And so I can do counseling, so to speak, to help with different situations or, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
geez, we talk all the time about, okay, what's coming up, and we sort of trade readings back and forth, like, okay, you do that, I'll do you. And then we go back and forth and kind of compare notes because the energies right now are off the charts, insane. But speaking of kind of one of the things that you do, I know you gave a client of ours guidance on their intentions before they sat with Mother Ayahuasca, and I think that's really important, for people to really sit with their intentions, and then to also get guidance from somebody who has a direct connection to source. So what advice do you offer people going to sit with Mother Ayahuasca or any other plant medicine for that matter?
that was just really interesting. I have not personally done ayahuasca, but a dear friend of mine was going on this journey. And so he was like, I want to have a full session with you. So we did a full session, over an hour. And I was able to tap in with what spirit wanted him to learn with going to ayahuasca and set up his so that he kind of knew what spirit wanted him to do, what he was supposed to learn, and the guidance. And it was really powerful, the session. And then he ended up calling me every day from where he went out of the country to do this. And we would set he would describe what it would had happened to him, and we would work with the energies that had happened that day in his body and help heal them if that's what needed to be done, or to explain them. And then we would set the intentions for the next day. So he actually went in each day with source driven intentions of what he should experience. And he said his experience was so much more gentle from what other people had went through. And there's still difficult times that you go through on ayahuasca, but we were able to, it was just really incredible. It was just
He had a very beautiful and profound experience. So
very, very profound
yeah,
that I don't think he would have had if it hadn't been set up beforehand.
I agree with that. And when I work with people here too, and I don't serve ayahuasca, but with intentions, I'm always telling them these are the most important things that you come with. So they have to be, they have to be very well thought out, and the work has to be done to prepare for what the intentions are.
Right.
Because a lot of people know, oh, I want to be fixed. Well, what does that mean? What do you want to fix? And you've got to be specific about it. Do you want to see the problems? Do you want to fix the problems? Do you want to integrate them? What do you want to go back to your childhood and work on them? And you have to be kind of nuanced about it, because otherwise you don't know how spirit's going to decide to do it. And then you may miss a piece of it that you're like, okay, I don't understand that portion, and then have to go back. And so these are ways that you can kind of really work with spirit for your highest and greatest good. And it's also a good idea to sometimes just say, show me what is in my highest and greatest good, but is what is for my highest and greatest good. But it's still, intentions is super important.
The other thing I was able to do or one of my other gifts, I can create portals. And I see your eyes roll. I guess you didn't know.
No, I didn't roll. I went like, wow, because actually I have a client who needs one closed. So
yeah, I can deal with portals, create them, close them.
I can't, I don't know how to open or close them though.
Yeah, in my travels, I was in Germany and ended up creating a portal for a friend, and she was able to go down in the earth and work with dragons. And another time she was able to go down and work with beings. I wasn't allowed to go down. I just created the safe portal so that she could go down and come back up and guide her with the questions that she needed when she was talking to the other beings in the earth, and making sure everything was safe. But that was what I was also able to do for our friend that did the ayahuasca, because you're in a situation where you've got a lot of people around you going through the experience the same way, and was able to create a portal for him so that those other energies didn't jump in to him, that other people were releasing, or the other energies that come into that kind of situation when it's, they get attracted. It's like if it's like a wreck on the freeway, if there's a lot going on, people just want to come and stop and look.
Looky lose.
And that's kind of what the spirit world does too. They're like, oh, there's a whole bunch of people here. Let's go look. So, but to be able to create a safe portal for him, it really made
That is really smart, Patrice, because honestly, that's the reason I haven't gone to a big center to sit with Mother, because I'm going to have somebody do a private ceremony at my home, just me, because if I was doing this with a bunch of indigenous people, that would be a different story because they do this all the time. And their energies, if I knew them, are pure for the most part, but I don't want to be in that vulnerable of a state and be open to all of because I can fight those energies normally when I'm facilitating and doing stuff, like it's no big deal. But to invite them, accidentally, to have them around me when I'm in such a vulnerable state, wanting to have this beautiful experience with Mother is a little disconcerting to me. So that's beautiful.
Yeah, it was really profound, because there was at one time when so much energy had been released in the room, and I pulled one thing out of you. I can pull energies and stuff out of people. And then I was like, I do not want you talking to anyone else today. There's so much energy going around after last night's event. You just go to your room and do not talk to anyone until tomorrow, or until after tonight's ceremony. Let's get you prepared for the next. So it was really interesting. I feel very privileged to have been a part of it. And
I want to ask you, kind of switch gears a little bit. How do you think we got here? How do you think that this whole experience we call life happened?
oh my gosh. I think that that is such a huge question, and as a human, we want these answers, and I don't know if we can really understand completely the complexity of everything, and I just don't think we can, in our form, can understand it completely. I do believe in one source, true source. Some people call it God. I mean, the creator of all things. Use whatever name you feel comfortable with. And I tap into that energy, and I believe that it isn't just Earth, that there's a big cosmos out there, and there's life on a lot of other places, and that it's just for me to think that we're the only ones and the only beings is just
very egotistical.
And the thing too is, again, as I said, my background is math and science, and I programmed large mainframe computers back in the day. So a very analytical, logical brain, but it's just mind blowing as in research, if something, normally in research, your experiment fails, but that opens 20 more questions that you can go to and then 20 more questions. And as I dive into this and learn and get exposed, it just opens up 20 more questions. It gets so much more complicated and complex. And it's, so I believe in the source consciousness, in unity consciousness, in love, and everything. It is, just keep the positive outlook the best you can, and to be.
Source has shown me visions of how we got here, but not the whole picture, but like nuanced parts of it. So that's why I was kind of hoping you could fill in the blanks. And I know you don't know like your origin yet either. And I halfway know mine. I'm Arcturian hybrid, I think. And many people have told me that just recently, actually, was at the one of the expos that one of my good friends who is a hybrid said this to me. So I was kind of shocked.
My first guide was Arcturian.
Yeah,
so
I
first
remember
spirit
that.
guide
And
was
I saw them during my healing, and I saw the purple light, and I was just like, wow, this is amazing.
But it's, it's interesting. I think Earth was seeded. We were seeded in a lot of different places on Earth.
Mhm.
The How exactly that happened. My particular, the first language that I learned, I call it my heart language because I learned it from spirit and it does come from my heart.
Mhm.
But I've been told, and I've called it that all these years, but I was told that it's an ancient language that was speaking on Earth a long, long time ago. It's Lemurian, which existed pre-Atlantis. And why they spent all this time teaching it to me, and they want this ancient language spoken on Earth again at this point in time. I don't know all the answers to that, but I do know that I speak this language that was here from a long, long time ago, and it needs to be activated again. And very,
Coincidentally, in meditation, Ashamasiki that comes into my head, and I'm like, "What's this now? Am I meant to be learning this?" Like, so it's
yeah,
funny because I speak a different light language, which I don't even have a name for it. It was after I did my first Changa ceremony, it just all started coming out of me, and then I remembered I also spoke it in childhood, but I didn't. I just forgot it. And it's funny, my daughter speaks the same one, and we can speak back and forth to one another and understand what each other is saying. It drives my boyfriend absolutely batty because he thinks it's just made up and we're just going back and forth, but we actually can communicate things. And so he gets really frustrated with it. It's pretty funny. But yeah, so that's been coming up for me in meditation. So I'm wondering, okay, am I supposed to learn this Lemurian light language now? So because it keeps coming up in my head.
well, I think there's a Lemurian, that language, which I call my heart language. But since then, I can now speak lots and lots of different languages, and the are different dialects of languages. And I believe, again, I'm Bible based, but the 12 tribes of Israel, I believe that we do have different tribes. I think they probably connect to 12 different spiritual beings and planets and all sorts of things. But we come from that heaven and to this earth in this lifetime. And if we're old souls, we've been on a lot of different heavens. So we know a lot of different of those lessons or gifts that we come to earth with. And I can speak those languages of your soul, and I can give you booster shots of who you are and your intuition and your path, and help you remember where you came from so you feel really loved. And it's another wonderful gift. Like I said, they just keep coming, and people come to me and say, "Can you do it?" And I don't know, and usually I learn another new gift. So it's yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Going kind of back to have you ever taught anybody to speak light language?
No, I haven't. I have had some people when they're around me, all of a sudden, like what you just said, all of a sudden go, "Oh, I can now speak a language." I was with a lady and and actually was in Peru with a group, and lady woke up and says, "I now can speak this language." I said, "Well, speak. What are you speaking?" And then I just spoke right back to her. So we were communicating. Neither one of us really knew what we were saying to each other, but we were communicating. And so everything's happening so much quicker now. And the people being born and coming in with so much remembrance and knowledge. And so if you wake up one day and all of a sudden can speak it, then just start speaking it and just keep doing it. And like it'll it'll become another language to you, and you'll be able to get messages and talk to people and stuff
Don't
like
be shy about it because a lot of people they're like embarrassed or they're nervous to speak it, and if you just let it embody you, the confidence comes because it's your soul's language. You know it. There's nothing to think about, and you just
that.
know it through you.
It's just trusting that inner knowing. We get, it's just, I ask often to spirit, just to help me remember, because I believe in past lives and many information that I have. Just help me remember what I need to move forward. It isn't always that I have to learn something new, as it is I just need to remember what I knew in other lifetimes, or what I'm supposed to remember for this lifetime, or what to do. So it's a lot of it's just a remembrance.
That happens to me too. And the more I stopped asking about who I was, like, who was I? Because they kept saying it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who you were. It doesn't matter what category or what name you put to it. It just doesn't matter. And then once I started to let that go, and I decided it was less and less important.
Yes. Get the
That
ego, mind wants to know out. Yeah.
yeah, and run things through my heart instead of through the taskmaster instead.
Mhm. Yeah, it trust and acceptance. Yeah, just trust it, have the faith, and believe me, when I first started doing this, and even now today, I mean, or even with you, I'm like, okay, I'm seeing or sensing this, and it was something I'd never seen before, but yet it was exactly what needed to be done. And that's usually the case with most, even though I've been doing this for a dozen years, I'll still just have to go with what I see. And I'm learning something new all the time.
Do you ever have messages from the dead come up? Because this is something that I'm not sure about yet.
Yes, that's something you and I've never talked about, I don't think.
No, we haven't.
It was interesting. A friend of mine, one night I was going to bed, I sensed spirits, and there was a spirit in my room. And so I was asking, who the spirit was. And it turned out to be my friend's grandmother, so who had been dead for a long, long time. And I said, okay. And she said, can I dictate a letter to you to give to my grandson? And her grandson was 60, so the grandmother had been dead for a long time. And I said, sure, you can do that. And so she did. And then she ended up staying for a while, and then she left, and she wanted to go to her daughter's house, which was my friend's mother. And sure enough, within a couple of weeks, the mother started declining in health and died within 2 months. So it was a prep for him. He was an only child, prep for him to an only living relative, and to prepare for all this and to move forward. So that was real interesting. And then, of course, when his mother did pass away, I helped with the energies of that and crossing over. But I have another friend whose police knocked on her door at 3:30 in the morning to tell her son was dead.
Oh.
And just a mother's nightmare. And the mother and the son had been estranged for a while, so just a double nightmare type thing. And his spirit came to me and wrote a letter to his mother, and I gave it to her, and it helped her through, because it was kind of a tragic death too. And she said that's what saved her. That's what got her through the whole thing. And it answered some questions of what needed to be answered through the thing. And so it's when the event happens, again, two things that totally out of the blue, but I just have these, if I meet you and it needs to be done, or if a spirit wants to use me, that's it. It's not that I advertise.
Let me run something by you, because I want to see what you think about this, because I have had a client who was in a coma. They was declared brain dead. It was not, but I could hear him like we were talking. I mean, I could hear him clear as day. My uncle, before he passed away, he told me a bunch of stuff that I didn't know, that I repeated to my cousin about, his best times. He knew he was dying. And we weren't in the same room or anything, but I could hear, and I could hear everything before, when they're in that state, like right before death. But after death, I can't, like, I'll get some kind of messages, but part of me asks, like, okay, is this something from the collective memory of the dead, the conscious collective memory of them, or is it actually the dead speaking to me? That's where the crux comes for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it could be both, either or, kind of depends. I mean, on my journey, I needed to do some family lineage healing. And at one time, my grandmother and my grandfather, who I never knew, he died when my mother was 10, they came to me and said, we need for you to clean up some family secrets, some lineage stuff. And I was like, okay, and I said, you're going to have to kind of tell me the secrets. And they were like, no, we can't tell you the secrets. You just clean it up. And I said, I don't think it works that way.
Yeah.
So, but they came to me, for that healing. Only once did they come. But I think it just depends. There's a lot of, also have, it was a friend of my son's that she went to high school with and lived in a different state. She was in her mid 30s and ended up on life support. And I was flying to California and her spirit came, and I was watching a movie. They said, put the movie on pause, close down your computer. And I was like, okay. And I meditated for a little bit and they were pulling the plug and she was crossing over and she wanted to make sure that she could cross over and would I help her. And again, that's only happened once, but it was a connection that that she could do to help her cross over. When we cross over, my understanding is we keep learning, we don't feel pain, we feel love, we go back to the heaven from which we came from.
I've done a remote viewing session with it, and there's also been a famous one done where they remote viewed what happened when you die. Two angels come and accompany you, your soul. The soul leaves the body, so the body stays, and then you're also met by your ancestors, two spirits. Then the angels depart, and then you go up to the light. So that's what was found in a remote viewing session that was done by the people that worked for the Stargate program. For the government. Yeah. So very, very powerful stuff when you think about it, because these aren't people that are prone to, want to believe woo-woo stuff. They're very hard science-y type people. So yeah, so very, very beautiful. But it's always bothered me that I can't connect to my grandmother, my German grandmother, who was like my everything. My parents both worked, so she raised me essentially, and we were really close. And I was deep in my painkiller addiction when she started to pass and started to get ill, and she never got to see the amazing person that I became. And I mean, I know she sees, but it's like I would just like to have some recognition from her. And I've had feathers. My daughter is like, we figured out that white feathers are her thing to communicate with us. And I literally in Utah had white feathers all over my yard on her birthday, and nobody else's yard, like in Lehigh, nobody else had any. They're like, why are all these goose feathers on your yard? And I was like, I think it's my grandma, I'm not sure. But I would love to like hear her speak, to be able to talk to her again.
Well, it's interesting. That's a human need, a human want. Again, I believe the universe, the cosmos is so vast, and Earth, some of the people that I love that have crossed over, haven't connected with, but my understanding is that they've gone on to another planet or to another situation. And it's just too much of a gap to fill that in. That's more of my human ego needs that, versus they've gone on to
another life.
Another life, so to speak. And it's not necessarily on Earth. It's to be totally somewhere else or just in a different dimension. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's just so vast and so complicated. And so it isn't that they don't still love you. It isn't that connection's not there, but the love is back to the source of all things.
And I've experienced hauntings, so I know that is 100% real. But I think I figured out those are just energies trapped there from something horrible that happened, or many energies trapped there from something horrible that happened. I froze there, and that creates like a coagulation and almost a sentience of its own if enough energies are you know, are gathering there.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah. I mean, again, it's, I think we have a choice whether to cross over or not at that time. And some get stuck here. We do have ghosts. We do have different entities that are here that haven't crossed over, especially when, you know, a
Well,
lot of
it's
our
moving very
movies kind of
fast.
true. You know, all of a sudden, if you were um, unexpectedly, you know, killed or an accident or something, and you just weren't expecting it. And the other thing too, I mean, if it was a long, long illness, on the other hand, of the information that I've had, is you kind of go into a health healing tank, you know, in somewhere else where they help you because of the long-term illness or sickness and stuff like that. So a lot of times you can't necessarily contact them on, they can't contact you on the other side because they're in intensive care in heaven, you know,
This is freaking me out, because in meditation, this was about 2 years ago, my uncle who killed himself finally came to me in meditation, and he had come to me in a psilocybin journey before that. And I said, where have you been? Because it's been years. And he said, I had to go through this rehabilitation program because I killed myself. And
Yeah.
I was like, what? Like, he said, no, it was like it was a long schooling thing that to reconnect myself to source. And his light was so bright when I saw, because I was on psilocybin, but his light was the brightest I've ever seen out of any of them. And he said, well, the reason why is because he had just gone through this whole
Yeah.
reintegrating with source thing.
And the same thing happens if you died of a trauma or a long-term illness, you know, debilitating illness for, you know, there are different places that you go to and heal. So,
Wow. Gosh, that fills in so many of the blanks there. That's so crazy that you said
yeah.
that. So which, and I don't want to call them gurus, but I guess like which spiritual guidance people that are out there doing work do you look up to, and do you get a lot from, do you listen to?
You know, it's a good question, and I don't really quite know the answer to give you. For the first 8 years after the accident, I was pretty much taught by the Holy Spirit. I was pretty much taught. Occasionally I'd go to different seminars, different speakers, but again, it was under the guidance of Holy Spirit. Sometimes they tell me who to sit by and who not to sit by, or whether or not I could go. I've read a lot. I just finished a 3-year spiritual program out of the University of Santa Monica, big, long reading list. So I've a lot of different people, but it seems I tend to be a collector of information, and I versus following any one person. I go and collect from a lot of different people, different
Like
information.
Dolores Cannon, bless her heart, she's rest in peace. She's
Yes. And yes, been there with her too. Matter of fact, that was the very first seminar I went to when I came back from Tibet, was Dolores Cannon's.
oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and met her years ago.
Wow, you met her before she passed? I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, she was in Rogers, Arkansas, and I came back and they're going, you're going to Rogers, Arkansas, and you're going to this event. And I'm like, Rogers, Arkansas, there's a, you know, I'm thinking of Mr. Rogers, you know, there's a Rogers, Arkansas. How do I even get there? And it's interesting. And then spirit, I've been very privileged during that 8 years of traveling quite a bit. I ended up in Thailand working with Thai children and Asian elephants, China and Tibet, Jamaica, Africa, South Africa, Kenya, various parts of Europe, up and down the West Coast, Mount Shasta,
Ooh, Mount
Colorado.
Shasta.
It was, and there's more. I can't remember them all. But and Peru was one of them. It was interesting. I just went to a little talk here. I'm in Asheville, North Carolina now. And these ladies have studied the indigenous people in Peru, and they were teaching us, it was a 2-day deal, and they were teaching us some meditations to do and things like that. And after the first night, I was like, oh my God, I already know all that. And it was downloaded to me when I was in Peru. And I knew I was getting downloads in Peru, but I didn't always know what they were. And then when they had studied this and they've been there several times, and the gurus and the people they've talked to, and they're sitting there, and I'm just sitting there going, yeah, know that. Yeah. Yeah, I'll do that. So if we get that remembrance from different lifetimes by just showing up in different places on the earth, by reading, we can be stimulated by nature, trees, rocks, all that
I
energy.
had something really profound happen to me too. During ceremony, a Navajo man was singing this song that I've never heard of, but I somehow knew the words and started singing. And he looked at me like, what, how do you know this is a very like, this is a, are you Navajo? And I was like, no, I'm not. He said, how do you know this? I said, I don't know. I don't know. And he was like, wow. And I knew the very complicated words, and it was a healing song, and it was very beautiful. And I have since, when I work with DMT, and other people have told me this too, they say you turn into a Navajo woman, like you very much turn into like, and you can see her, she's a very old woman. And I really connect with the spirit of her too. So it's very interesting what we can, and this was, yeah, I mean, this was like forever ago. And then when you connect the dots, it's like, oh, this is what that is.
I
Okay.
know it. I think a couple of years into this journey, I was in Crestone, Colorado, and these words came into my head. And then a couple days later, I was at the little trade fair that they had, and I was talking to a Lakota Indian and asking questions, and he pretty much was treating me like the white woman that I am. And then the words came back in my head, and I said, well, can you translate this? And I spoke it, and he said, you're not pronouncing it right. And I was like, and so he corrected me on my pronunciation. And then I said, well, asked him what I was saying. And he just looked at me and said, not only are you speaking Lakota, you're speaking the dialect of my tribe. And I was like, okay, so, and that was,
and that always catches them particularly off guard, right? Because
he was like,
there are things they teach to us,
yeah. So again, it's just, I go back to that Simon Says game, and red light, green light, just trusting, if you hear this in your head, be brave enough to say it out loud, and be brave enough to ask someone, do you know what this means? And just go with it. I suggest writing. I remember I went to Hawaii several times because I was dealing with Lemurian energies there, and just nature. One time
the heart
they
chakra.
just the elementals in the lava caves, and they were or lava tubes that they have, and the spirit says, go get your notebook. And I said, okay. And then all of a sudden, they're writing me letters and telling me stuff and teaching me stuff. It's just trusting and having faith. That's the big thing, trust and faith.
Well, I wanted to let everybody know we are going to be doing a part 2 of this, so this isn't over. So make sure to tune in for the second part, which will be released in about a week after this one. And if you would like for Patrice to do a little mini healing, we're going to do one live, so you guys can see kind of her genius and her beauty and all of the amazing abilities she has. So please reach out to me if you are interested, and it'll kind of just be a lottery-based thing, and we'll go with what we got. So thank you so much for joining today, and thank you, Patrice, and we'll see you back.
Yes,
Shortly.
looking forward to it.
Okay.